The morning sun cast long shadows across New Terra Colony as Jake Morrison and Paul Carter started their patrol shift. The two officers walked through the busy commercial district, their blue uniforms crisp and their badges shining in the artificial light. New Terra was one of the newest human settlements in this part of space, built on a planet that reminded people of Earth, with its blue skies and green forests. Jake was tall and broad-shouldered, with short brown hair and cold gray eyes. He had been a police officer for 8 years, first on Earth and now here on New Terra for the past 2 years. Paul was shorter and stockier, with red hair and freckles that made him look younger than his 35 years. He had followed Jake to New Terra when that colony offered good pay for experienced officers. Both men carried themselves with the confidence of people who believed they were always right. They had grown up in neighborhoods where everyone looked like them, and they had never bothered to question their assumptions about other people. On New Terra, they saw themselves as protectors of order, though their idea of order often meant keeping certain people in what they considered their proper place. The commercial district was busy that morning. Shopkeepers were opening their stores, and early customers were walking between the gleaming buildings. Hover cars moved quietly along the streets, and the smell of fresh coffee and baked goods filled the air. Everything seemed peaceful and normal. Then their communicators crackled to life. Unit 7, we have a disturbance at the Interstellar Communications Hub, came the voice of their dispatcher. Possible unauthorized access attempt. Respond immediately. Jake grabbed his communicator. Unit 7 responding. What kind of disturbance? Security. Report someone trying to access emergency channels without proper authorization. Could be a break-in attempt. Paul shook his head as they changed direction toward the communications hub. Probably another one of those people thinking they can just walk in and use military equipment, he said to Jake. Don't they know there are rules? The communications hub was a tall silver building in the center of the district. It housed the colony's main connection to Earth and other human settlements. Only authorized personnel were supposed to access the emergency channels, which were reserved for military and government use. When they arrived, they found the security guard waiting for them outside the main entrance. He was a nervous-looking man named Gary who worked the day shift. Officers, thank goodness you're here, Gary said, wiping sweat from his forehead. There's a woman inside who says she needs to send an urgent message to Earth Command. She claims she has authorization, but I've never seen her before. What does she look like? Jake asked. She's a black woman, maybe in her 40s. Well-dressed. But you know how some of them can be. They think they can talk their way into anything. Paul and Jake exchanged a look. They had heard similar complaints before from Gary, who seemed to have problems with anyone who didn't look like him. We'll handle this, Jake said. Where is she now? Still inside, trying to use the emergency terminal. I told her to wait, but she said it was urgent. The officers walked into the building, their hands resting on their weapons out of habit. The main floor of the communications hub was filled with public terminals where colonists could send messages to family and friends on other worlds. The emergency terminals were on a restricted level, behind locked doors and security checkpoints. They found Dr. Maya Johnson in the restricted section, standing at one of the emergency terminals. She was a striking woman with intelligent dark eyes and graying hair pulled back in a professional style. She wore a dark blue suit that looked expensive and well-tailored. Her fingers moved quickly across the terminal's keyboard as she tried to establish a connection. Excuse me, ma'am, Jake called out in a loud voice. You need to step away from that terminal right now. Dr. Johnson looked up, her expression calm but concerned. Officers, I'm Dr. Maya Johnson. I need to contact Earth. Command immediately. We have a situation that requires urgent attention. I don't care who you say you are, Paul said, walking closer. This is a restricted area. You're not supposed to be here." Dr. Johnson reached into her jacket and pulled out a small card. "Here's my identification. I'm a former Earth Defense Force commander, and I'm currently assigned to this colony for special research. I have clearance for emergency communications." Jake took the card, but barely glanced at it. Anyone can fake these things. "Gary says he's never seen you before, and he knows everyone who's supposed to be here. I only arrived on New Terra 3 days ago," Dr. Johnson explained patiently. "My assignment is classified, but I can provide you with verification codes if you'll allow me to complete this communication." "Sure you can," Paul said with a sneer. "Look, lady, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this isn't some public phone booth. You can't just walk in here and use military equipment." Dr. Johnson's voice remained calm, but there was an edge of urgency in it. "Officers, I understand your caution, but time is critical. I've detected unusual energy signatures around the colony's perimeter. There are indications of surveillance activity that Earth Command needs to know about immediately." Jake laughed harshly. "Energy signatures? Surveillance? What are you, some kind of scientist?" "Yes, I am. I'm also a former military officer with extensive experience in defense and intelligence matters. If you'll just verify my credentials with your central command, they can confirm my authorization." But the two officers had already made up their minds. They saw a black woman in an area where they thought she didn't belong, making claims they found hard to believe. Their training should have told them to verify her story, but their prejudices were stronger than their professionalism. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," Jake ordered. Dr. Johnson's eyes widened in surprise. "Officers, you're making a mistake. Please, just contact your command center. They can verify everything I've told you. The only mistake here is you thinking you could waltz in here and use equipment you have no business touching," Paul said, pulling out his handcuffs. "You're under arrest for trespassing and attempted unauthorized access to military communications." "This is ridiculous," Dr. Johnson said, but she didn't resist as Paul cuffed her hands behind her back. "You're potentially endangering this entire colony by preventing me from sending this message." "Save it for the judge," Jake said. "Maybe you can tell him all about your made-up credentials and your energy signatures." As they led Dr. Johnson out of the building, several colonists stopped to stare. Word spread quickly through the small community that the police had arrested someone at the communications hub. Some people shook their heads in disapproval, wondering why the officers hadn't taken more time to investigate the woman's claims. Dr. Johnson walked with dignity between the two officers, her head held high despite the handcuffs. She said nothing more, but her mind was racing. The surveillance activity she had detected was real, and every minute of delay could put the colony at risk. But she also knew that losing her temper or arguing further would only make things worse. As they reached the police station, she made a mental note of the officers' names from their badges. Jake Morrison and Paul Carter had just made what might be the biggest mistake of their careers, but they were too blinded by their assumptions to realize it. The arrest was complete, but the real story was just beginning. Dr. Maya Johnson sat in the small holding cell at the New Terra Colony police station. The cell was clean but basic, with a narrow bed, a small sink, and a toilet. The walls were painted white, and the only window was a small square of reinforced glass that looked out onto the station's parking area. She had been there for 6 hours now, and no one had come to check on her since the booking process. She used the time to think about what she had observed before her arrest. The energy signatures she had detected were unlike anything in the colony's database. They appeared to be scanning pulses, the kind used for reconnaissance by advanced civilizations. The patterns suggested someone was studying the colony from a distance, learning about human technology and behavior. Meanwhile, at the New Terra Science Station, Lisa Park was starting to worry. Dr. Johnson was supposed to check in every 4 hours, but she hadn't heard from her since early morning. Lisa was a young woman in her late 20s, with short blonde hair and bright green eyes. She had been working as a research assistant for 3 years and had never known Dr. Johnson to miss a scheduled check-in. Lisa tried calling Dr. Johnson's personal communicator, but it went straight to voicemail. She checked the duty roster again, confirming that Dr. Johnson was supposed to be monitoring the perimeter sensors today. The sensors were showing some unusual readings, but without Dr. Johnson's expertise, Lisa wasn't sure what they meant. At the police station, Jake Morrison and Paul Carter were finishing their paperwork. They sat at their desks in the main office, typing up their report about the arrest. The office was typical of small-town police stations, with metal desks, filing cabinets, and a coffee machine that had seen better days. "So what do we write about her story?" Paul asked, looking up from his computer screen. Jake shrugged. "Just put down that she claimed to be some kind of military person, but she couldn't provide proper authorization. We'll let the prosecutor decide if she's just confused or if she's trying to scam someone." "What about all that stuff about energy signatures and surveillance?" Paul said. "Probably watched too many science fiction movies," Jake replied. "You know how these people can be. They think they can make up some crazy story, and we'll just believe it." Neither officer bothered to run Dr. Johnson's identification through the military database. They had decided she was lying, and they didn't want to waste time on what they saw as obvious fake credentials. If they had checked, they would have found that her identification was real, but her full military record was classified at the highest levels. Back at the science station, Lisa was becoming more concerned. She had been monitoring the sensors for 2 hours now, and the unusual readings were getting stronger. The patterns looked like active scanning, but she had never seen anything like them before. She tried to contact Dr. Johnson again, but still got no response. Lisa decided to check with Colony Security to see if they had any information about Dr. Johnson's whereabouts. She called the main security office and spoke with the duty officer. "This is Lisa Park at the science station," she said. "I'm trying to locate Dr. Maya Johnson. She was supposed to check in hours ago, and I'm getting some unusual sensor readings that might be related to her research." The security officer, a man named Steve Collins, checked his computer. "I don't show any security alerts today." "What kind of research was Dr. Johnson doing?" "She was monitoring the colony's perimeter for unusual activity," Lisa explained. "She mentioned something about possible surveillance, but I thought it was just routine background monitoring." Steve frowned. "Surveillance? By who?" "We haven't had any reports of suspicious activity." "I don't know," Lisa said. "But these sensor readings are definitely not normal. They look like someone is scanning us from outside the colony." Steve promised to look into it and get back to her. After he hung up, he started checking with different departments to see if anyone had seen Dr. Johnson. It took him an hour to trace her movements to the communications hub and discover that she had been arrested. Steve called Lisa back with the news. She was shocked. "Arrested? For what?" "Trespassing and unauthorized access to military communications," Steve said. "Officers Morrison and Carter picked her up this morning." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. If Dr. Johnson had been trying to send an emergency message when she was arrested, it meant the situation was more serious than Lisa had realized. She looked at her sensor readings again, and this time she saw patterns that made her stomach tighten. With worry, the scanning pulses were getting more frequent and more detailed. Whatever was out there was learning about the colony's defenses, communication systems, and population centers. Dr. Johnson had been right to try to contact Earth Command, but now she was locked up and unable to help Dot at the police station. Dr. Johnson was finally allowed to make a phone call. She tried to reach her contact at Earth Command, But the call was routed through the colony's civilian communication system, which didn't have the encryption necessary for classified conversations. She left a careful message asking for someone to verify her credentials with the local authorities. She also tried to call the science station, hoping to reach Lisa. When Lisa answered, Dr. Johnson spoke quickly and quietly. "Lisa, this is Dr. Johnson. I'm in police custody right now, but I need you to continue monitoring the perimeter sensors. Have you noticed any unusual activity?" "Dr. Johnson, thank goodness," Lisa said. "The readings have been getting stronger. All day. It looks like active scanning, but I've never seen patterns like these before." Dr. Johnson felt her heart rate increase. "Listen to me carefully. Those readings indicate we're being observed by an advanced civilization. They're studying our technology and our behavior patterns. I was trying to contact Earth Command when I was arrested." "What should I do?" Lisa asked. "Keep monitoring and recording everything. Try to get the readings to colony leadership, but be careful how you present the information. Some people might not believe what they're seeing." Before Dr. Johnson could say more, a guard appeared at her cell. "Time's up," he said. "Back to your cell." Dr. Johnson had to end the call, but she had given Lisa enough information to continue the work. She sat back down on the narrow bed and wondered how long it would take for someone to verify her credentials. Every hour that passed gave the unknown. Observers more time to study the colony. Outside the colony's perimeter, invisible to human sensors, 3 sleek ships maintained their positions in the shadow of a large asteroid. The ships belonged to the Kepler Syndicate, a confederation of alien species that had been watching human expansion into space for several years. The ship's commander, a tall being with silver skin and large dark eyes, studied the data they had collected about New Terra Colony. The humans seemed to be a young species, still learning how to live together peacefully. The commander had been particularly interested in their justice system, wanting to understand how humans treated each other. The arrest of Dr. Johnson had been observed and recorded. The commander found it disturbing that the human officers had ignored evidence and made assumptions based on appearance. It raised questions about whether humans were ready for contact with other civilizations. "Continue monitoring," the commander ordered. "We need to understand more about these humans before we make our decision about contact." The fate of New Terra Colony's future relationships with alien civilizations now hung in the balance, and the key to everything sat in a small jail cell, waiting for someone to believe her story. The morning of the trial arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze across New Terra Colony. Jake Morrison and Paul Carter walked into the courthouse, feeling confident about their case. They had both testified in court many times before, and they were sure this would be another routine conviction. The courthouse was the largest building in the colony's government district. It was built from local stone and had tall windows that let in plenty of natural light. The main courtroom could hold about 200 people, and today it was nearly full. Word had spread through the colony about the arrest, and many people were curious about what would happen. Jake wore his best uniform, the one he saved for court appearances and special occasions. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, and his badge gleamed under the courtroom lights. Paul had also dressed carefully, though he seemed more nervous than his partner. "I don't understand why there are so many people here," Paul whispered to Jake as they took their seats at the prosecution table. "It's just a simple trespassing case." Jake looked around the packed courtroom. He recognized many faces from the colony, including some prominent business owners and government officials. "Maybe they're just curious," he said. "Or maybe they want to see what happens when someone tries to break into military communications." At the defense table, Dr. Maya Johnson sat with her court-appointed lawyer, a young man named Danny Kim, who had only been practicing law for 2 years. Danny was nervous, because he had never handled a case involving someone with a military background, and he wasn't sure how to verify Dr. Johnson's claims about her credentials. Dr. Johnson looked calm and professional in a dark gray suit. She had spent the past week in custody, but she showed no signs of anger or frustration. Her main concern was still the alien surveillance, which Lisa Park had continued to monitor. The scanning activity had increased each day, but colony leadership had dismissed Lisa's reports as equipment malfunctions. The bailiff, a heavy-set man named Carl Roberts, stood up and called for attention. All rise for the Honorable Judge arriving from Earth Command via quantum transport. Everyone in the courtroom stood up, expecting to see the usual visiting judge who handled serious cases on New Terra. The colony's legal system required judges from Earth Command for certain types of cases, especially those involving military or security matters. The door behind the judge's bench opened, and a figure in black judicial robes walked in. Jake and Paul looked up casually. Then their faces went completely white. Judge Maya Johnson walked to the bench with the same dignity she had shown during her arrest. Her gray hair was now styled in a more formal way, and she wore the traditional black robes of a colonial circuit judge. She carried herself with the authority of someone who had spent years making important decisions. The courtroom fell silent as people realized what was happening. Jake's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no sound came out. Paul grabbed his partner's arm so tightly that Jake would have bruises later. "Please be seated," Judge Johnson said in a clear, strong voice. Her eyes swept across the courtroom, taking in the shocked faces of the two officers who had arrested her. "We are here today to hear the case of New Terra Colony versus Maya Johnson regarding charges of trespassing and unauthorized access to military communications." The prosecutor, a woman named Linda Hayes, stood up slowly. She had been told that morning that a new judge would be arriving, but she had no idea it would be the defendant in her case. "Your Honor, I believe there may be some confusion about the case assignment." Judge Johnson nodded. "There is indeed a significant conflict of interest here, as I am the defendant in this case. I am immediately recusing myself from hearing this matter, and I have already requested that Earth Command send a replacement judge via emergency transport." She looked directly at Jake and Paul, who were still staring at her in shock. "However, before I step down from this case, I want to address some serious concerns about the conduct of the arresting officers." The entire courtroom was now completely silent. People leaned forward to hear every word. According to the arrest report filed by Officers Morrison and Carter, they claimed that the defendant could not provide proper identification or authorization for her presence in the communications hub. However, the defendant's military identification card was never properly verified through the appropriate channels. Jake finally found his voice. "Your Honor, we checked the ID, and it looked fake." Judge Johnson's expression remained neutral, but her voice carried the weight of years of legal experience. "Did you run the identification through the military database, Officer Morrison?" "We no, Your Honor. We didn't think it was necessary." "And did you contact your command center to verify the defendant's claims about her assignment to this colony?" Paul shook his head, unable to speak. Judge Johnson continued. "The defendant's military record shows 22 years of service with the Earth Defense Force, including combat experience in the Centauri border conflicts and specialized training in first contact protocols. She holds the rank of retired commander and currently serves as a special advisor to Earth Command on matters of colonial security." The murmur that ran through the courtroom was like a wave breaking on the shore. People began to understand that something much bigger was happening at a simple trespassing case. Furthermore, Judge Johnson continued, the defendant was attempting to contact Earth Command about potential alien surveillance activity around this colony. This information was contained in her initial statement to the arresting officers. but it was dismissed without investigation. Linda Hayes stood up again. Your Honor, what is the current status of that alleged surveillance? The surveillance is ongoing and has intensified over the past week, Judge Johnson replied. The alien vessels have been monitoring our communications, our technology, and our behavior patterns. They are particularly interested in how we treat each other and how our justice system works. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. The reality of alien contact was something people had always imagined might happen, but nobody had expected it to happen here on New Terra Dot. Jake Morrison felt like the world was spinning around him. Everything he thought he knew about the past week had been turned upside down. The woman he had dismissed as a troublemaker was actually a decorated military officer and now a judge. The story he had laughed at about alien surveillance was real. Judge Johnson looked at the packed courtroom. The aliens have been watching us, and they have seen how we treat each other. They have seen 2 police officers ignore evidence and make assumptions based on appearance rather than facts. They have seen a justice system that initially failed to protect the rights of one of its own citizens. Paul Carter finally found his voice. Your Honor, we didn't know. We were just doing our jobs. Your job, Officer Carter, is to protect and serve all citizens of this colony, regardless of their appearance or background. Your job is to investigate claims thoroughly and treat all people with dignity and respect. The judge paused, letting her words sink in. I am now stepping down from this case, as I cannot ethically preside over my own trial. However, I want everyone in this courtroom to understand that what happens next will determine not just the fate of these officers, but the future of human contact with alien civilizations. She stood up, and the bailiff called for everyone to rise. This court is in recess until a replacement judge arrives. But before I go, I want to say that the aliens are still watching us. They are deciding whether humanity is ready to join the larger galactic community. Our response to this situation will be part of that decision. As Judge Johnson left the courtroom, the 2 officers sat in stunned silence. They had arrested a judge, ignored evidence of alien contact, and potentially damaged humanity's first impression with an alien species. The weight of their actions was finally beginning to sink in. The courtroom erupted in conversation as people tried to process what they had just learned. New Terra Colony would never be the same again. 3 hours after the dramatic courtroom revelation, emergency sirens began wailing across New Terra Colony. The sound echoed off the buildings and sent people running to their windows to see what was happening. In the sky above the colony, 3 large ships appeared out of nowhere, their silver hulls gleaming in the afternoon sun. Colony Administrator Helen Brooks stood in the emergency command center, watching the ships on the main screen. She was a woman in her 50s, with short gray hair and worried brown eyes. She had been in charge of New Terra for 5 years, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Are they hostile? She asked the military advisor standing beside her. We don't know, replied Captain Rick Stone, the colony's defense coordinator. They're not responding to our communication attempts, but they're not attacking either. They're just watching. Dr. Maya Johnson entered the command center, no longer wearing her judicial robes, but dressed in a simple blue uniform that marked her as a special advisor to Earth Command. She had been officially reinstated in her role as First Contact Specialist. After the morning's events, Administrator Brooks, Dr. Johnson said, I need to speak with you about the alien vessels. Helen Brooks turned around, and for a moment she looked embarrassed. Dr. Johnson, I owe you an apology. We should have listened to your warnings about the surveillance activity. There's no time for apologies now, Dr. Johnson replied. The aliens have been watching us for over a week. They've seen everything that happened, including my arrest in the court proceedings this morning. They're here to make a decision about whether to establish contact with humanity. Captain Stone frowned. What kind of decision? Whether we're ready to join the galactic community, Dr. Johnson explained. They've been studying our technology, our society, and our justice system. They want to know if humans can be trusted as partners in trade and cooperation. Suddenly, the communication system crackled to life. A voice spoke in perfect English, though it had a strange musical quality that made it sound clearly alien. This is Commander Zahar of the Kepler Syndicate exploration vessel. We request permission to send a diplomatic representative to your colony for formal contact proceedings. Helen Brooks looked at Dr. Johnson, who nodded. This is Colony Administrator Brooks. Permission granted. We're prepared to receive your representative. Thank you. Our diplomatic shuttle will arrive at your main landing pad in 30 minutes. We request that Dr. Maya Johnson be present as your first contact specialist. Dr. Johnson picked up the communicator. This is Dr. Johnson. I'll be there to meet your representative. We are pleased to finally speak with you directly, Dr. Johnson. We have observed your recent difficulties with local law enforcement. We found their behavior ... concerning. A chill ran through the command center. The aliens had been watching everything, and they had formed opinions about human behavior based on what they had seen at the police station. Jake Morrison and Paul Carter sat in the break room, still trying to process what had happened in court. They had been suspended from duty pending an investigation, and they faced possible criminal charges for their conduct. I can't believe we arrested a judge, Paul said, staring at his coffee cup. How did we mess up so badly? Jake shook his head. I keep thinking about all the things we didn't do. We didn't check her ID properly. We didn't listen to her story. We just assumed she was lying because ... Because of what she looked like, Paul finished. Because we thought we knew better. Both men sat in silence, thinking about their actions. For the first time in their careers, they were forced to confront the fact that their assumptions and prejudices had led them to make serious mistakes. Chief of Police Dan Miller walked into the break room, his face grim. Morrison Carter, you need to come with me. The aliens want to speak with you. Jake's face went pale. The aliens, why? Because they witnessed your arrest of Dr. Johnson, and they want to understand why you acted the way you did. This isn't just about your careers anymore. This is about humanity's future relationship with alien civilizations. At the landing pad, a crowd had gathered to watch the historic first contact. The alien shuttle was unlike anything humans had ever seen. It was shaped like a teardrop and seemed to float rather than land, with no visible engines or propulsion system. A door opened in the side of the shuttle, and a figure stepped out. The alien was tall and graceful, with silver skin that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. It had large dark eyes and wore flowing robes that changed color as it moved. Dr. Johnson stepped forward. Welcome to New Terra Colony. I am Dr. Maya Johnson, and I'm honored to meet you. The alien bowed slightly. I am Ambassador Kai of the Kepler Syndicate. We have been watching your species with great interest. You have achieved remarkable technological progress, but we have concerns about your social development. What kind of concerns? Helen Brooks asked. Ambassador Kai looked at her with those large dark eyes. We have observed how some of your people treat others based on physical appearance rather than character or ability. We witnessed the arrest of Dr. Johnson and the assumptions made by your law enforcement officers. This behavior troubles us. Dr. Johnson nodded. I understand your concerns. Ambassador, the officers who arrested me made mistakes based on prejudice and assumption. But I hope you'll give humanity a chance to show that we can learn and grow from our mistakes. That is precisely why we are here, Ambassador Kai replied. We want to speak with those officers and understand their thinking. We want to see if humans are capable of recognizing their errors and changing their behavior. A few minutes later, Jake and Paul arrived at the landing pad, escorted by Chief Miller. Both officers looked nervous and uncertain, but they had agreed to speak with. The aliens. Ambassador Kai studied them carefully. "You are the officers who arrested Dr. Johnson?" "Yes, sir." "I mean, yes, Ambassador," Jake said, his voice shaking slightly. "Tell me why you ignored her identification and dismissed her claims about surveillance activity." Jake and Paul exchanged glances. They had been dreading this moment, but they knew they had to be honest. "We made assumptions," Paul said quietly. "We saw someone who didn't look like the people we expected to see in that area, and we decided she must be lying. Even when she showed you identification, we didn't want to believe it was real," Jake admitted. "We thought we knew better." "We were wrong." Ambassador Kai was quiet for a long moment. "In our civilization, we have learned that judging others by appearance rather than actions leads to injustice and conflict. We had hoped that humanity had learned this lesson as well." "Some of us have," Dr. Johnson said. "But we're still learning as a species. These officers made mistakes, but they're willing to admit their errors and learn from them." "Is this true?" Ambassador Kai asked Jake and Paul. Jake nodded. "Yes, Ambassador. We realize now that we let our prejudices cloud our judgment. We ignored evidence and made assumptions based on Dr. Johnson's appearance. We were wrong, and we're willing to face the consequences of our actions." Paul added, "We want to learn from this mistake. We want to be better officers and better people." Ambassador Kai looked at Dr. Johnson. "What do you recommend for these officers?" Dr. Johnson thought carefully before answering. "I recommend that they undergo sensitivity training and bias correction. Therapy. They should learn about different cultures and backgrounds, and they should be held accountable for their actions. But I also believe that people can change if they're willing to do the work." The alien ambassador nodded slowly. "Very well. We will consider your colony's response to this situation as we evaluate humanity's readiness for contact with the galactic community. Your ability to recognize and correct injustice will be an important factor in our decision." As the sun began to set over New Terra Colony, the future of human-alien relations hung in the balance. The next few days would determine whether humanity would take its place among the stars or remain isolated in its own corner of the galaxy. 1 week after first contact, New Terra Colony had become the center of attention for the entire human galaxy. News crews from Earth and other colonies had arrived to cover the historic events. The story of 2 officers who arrested their own judge and nearly ruined humanity's first contact with aliens had spread across human space. In the colony's main conference center, preparations were underway for the final meeting between the Kepler Syndicate and New Terra's leadership. Ambassador Kai and 2 other alien representatives sat at one side of a large oval table. On the other side sat Colony Administrator Helen Brooks, Dr. Maya Johnson, and several other human officials. Jake Morrison and Paul Carter sat at a smaller table nearby. Both men looked different than they had a week ago. They had spent every day since the first contact meeting in intensive training sessions with Dr. Johnson and other experts. They had learned about different cultures, studied the history of prejudice and discrimination, and worked with counselors to understand their own biases. Jake had lost weight from stress, and his usual confident expression had been replaced by one of genuine humility. Paul looked tired but determined. Both men wore civilian clothes instead of their police uniforms, as they were still suspended from duty. Dr. Johnson stood up to address the gathering. "Ambassador Kai, thank you for giving us this week to demonstrate humanity's capacity for growth and change. I believe you'll find that we have made significant progress." Ambassador Kai's silver skin seemed to shimmer as he nodded. "We have observed your colony's response to the situation with great interest. We are pleased to see that you have taken our concerns seriously. The most important change," Dr. Johnson continued, has been in Officers Morrison and Carter. They have volunteered to undergo complete retraining and to serve as examples of how people can overcome their biases. She gestured to the two men. They would like to speak with you directly about what they have learned. Jake stood up slowly, his hands shaking slightly. A week ago, he would never have imagined himself speaking to alien representatives about his mistakes, but the gravity of the situation had changed him. Ambassador Kai, Jake began, I want to apologize for my actions. I arrested Dr. Johnson because I made assumptions based on her appearance. I didn't check her credentials properly because I had already decided she was lying. I realize now that my prejudices blinded me to the truth. Paul stood up beside his partner. We both acted unprofessionally and unjustly. We've spent this week learning about the damage that prejudice can cause, not just to individuals, but to entire communities. We understand now that what we did could have hurt all of humanity's chances for peaceful contact with your people. Ambassador Kai studied them carefully. What have you learned that you did not know before? Jake thought for a moment before answering. I learned that my assumptions about people were based on fear and ignorance, not facts. I grew up in a place where everyone looked like me, and I never challenged my beliefs about others. I thought being a police officer meant I was automatically right, but I was wrong. Paul added, I learned that treating people with dignity and respect isn't just about being nice. It's about justice and fairness. When we judge people by their appearance instead of their actions, we prevent justice from working properly. Another alien representative, who had introduced himself as Counselor Vex, leaned forward. In our observations of human societies, we have seen this pattern of prejudice repeated many times. What makes you believe that your species can overcome these tendencies? Dr. Johnson answered. Because we can learn and change. These two officers are proof of that. A week ago, they were convinced they had done nothing wrong. Today, they understand the harm they caused and are committed to being better. She looked around the room. But the change isn't just in them. Our entire colony has been forced to examine how we treat each other. We've implemented new training programs for all law enforcement officers. We've created community dialogue groups where people can discuss their biases openly. We've established oversight committees to ensure that incidents like this don't happen. Again, Colony Administrator Brooks stood up. Ambassador, we know we're not perfect. Humans make mistakes, and some of our people still harbor prejudices. But what makes us worthy of your partnership is our ability to recognize our flaws and work to fix them. Ambassador Kai was quiet for several minutes, consulting with his colleagues in their musical alien language. Finally, he turned back to the humans. The Kepler Syndicate has been watching many species as they develop space travel and advanced technology. We have learned that technological progress alone does not make a species ready for galactic citizenship. Social and moral development are equally important. He looked directly at Jake and Paul. We have seen species that never learn to overcome their prejudices. They remain trapped in cycles of conflict and discrimination, eventually destroying themselves or becoming isolated from the galactic community. The room was completely silent as everyone waited for the ambassador's decision. However, Ambassador Kai continued, we have also seen species that recognize their flaws and work to overcome them. These species became valuable members of all the galactic community because they brought not only technology and resources, but wisdom earned through struggle and growth. Dr. Johnson felt her heart beating faster. Everything depended on what the ambassador said next. The events of the past week have shown us both the worst and the best of humanity. We witnessed prejudice and injustice, but we also witnessed accountability, learning, and genuine change. Most importantly, we saw that when humans make mistakes, other humans are willing to stand up and demand better. Ambassador Kai stood up, and his flowing robes shifted to a bright gold color. The Kepler Syndicate has decided to offer New Terra Colony a provisional membership in our trade confederation. This membership will allow you to benefit from our technology and resources while you continue to develop your social systems. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Helen Brooks wiped tears from her eyes, and Dr. Johnson felt a weight lift from her shoulders. But Ambassador Kai wasn't finished. However, this membership comes with conditions. Officers Morrison and Carter will serve as ambassadors to other human colonies, teaching them about the importance of justice and equality. Their story will be shared throughout human space as an example of how people can change and grow. Jake and Paul looked at each other in amazement. Instead of being punished and forgotten, they were being asked to help improve humanity's relationship with alien civilizations. Additionally, the ambassador continued, Dr. Johnson will serve as the primary liaison between the Kepler Syndicate and human colonies. Her experience with both law and diplomacy makes her uniquely qualified for this role. Over the following months, New Terra Colony became a model for human-alien cooperation. The trade agreement with the Kepler Syndicate brought new technologies that improved life for everyone in the colony. Advanced medical equipment, clean energy systems, and improved communication networks transformed the settlement. Jake and Paul kept their promise to serve as ambassadors. They traveled to other human colonies, sharing their story and teaching other law enforcement officers about the importance of treating all people with dignity and respect. Their presentations were sometimes uncomfortable, as they had to admit their mistakes publicly, but they never backed down from their commitment to change. Dr. Johnson divided her time between New Terra and other human settlements, helping to establish protocols for contact with alien species. Her arrest had been the beginning of a new chapter in human history, one where humanity's capacity for growth and justice would be tested again and again. The alien ships remained in orbit around New Terra, a reminder that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. But more importantly, they were a symbol of hope that even when people make serious mistakes, they can learn, change, and build a better future. In the end, what had started as a simple case of police prejudice had become the foundation for humanity's entry into the galactic community. The officers who had nearly ruined first contact had instead become the champions of the values that made contact possible: justice, equality, and the courage to admit when you're wrong and work to be better.